Let's move on to the papers. We're starting today, in fact, with the Spanish papers. They're reacting to those shocking revelations of a deadly crackdown on migrants at the border crossing between Spain and Morocco. It happened back in June, led to the deaths of dozens of migrants. And our press reviewer, Dipti, is here to take a look at it for us. Dipti.
Well, Stuart, it is a really big story this Wednesday morning. It's dominating the Spanish papers in particular. But let's start with the Lighthouse Reports. It's a collaborative investigative journalism network. They're the ones who, in collaboration with several European papers, led this investigation. And in their article today on their website, as they put it, it was the biggest loss of life on at a European land border in living memory. And it happened this year, yet it was barely reported at the time. These events date back to June 24th, where at least 23 asylum seekers died. Dozens went missing after a group of them attempted to enter a border post in Melilla, a Spanish outpost on the coast of North Africa. Now, after an intensive investigation, as I said, led by major European newspapers, including Le Monde, the British daily The Independent, and the Spanish daily El País, which on its front page today evokes here in this headline the agony of those migrants suffered on both sides of the border. And this image that you see in the front page, on the front page of El País here, is actually Barrio Chino. It's a border post at the center of the deaths. Now, reporters took footage of the layout of this border post and used it to create a sort of 3D model, which they then collaborated with at least 40 statements from witnesses of who were there on that day to figure out what happened. The investigation, as El País says, revealed that at least one death may have taken place on Spanish soil. Stuart. And
there's a video as well, isn't there, Dipti, that's emerged of exactly what happened there?
Well, the video really shows us what happened within minutes of those asylum seekers reaching that border post. Those who were trying to enter were basically caught in this deadly crush, and there's a 17-minute video that's published on El País's website today. We want to show you an excerpt, but before we do, we want to warn that the images are distressing. You will see why. Essentially, you see these migrants lying here, several of them injured. In some cases, in the video, you can actually see deceased migrants as well. Some of them are passed out. They were lying there for several hours in the summer heat. In some cases, you also see them, these unarmed migrants, being hit by batons as well. So the images in this video are very distressing, but certainly point the blame at Spanish and Moroccan authorities, who for the past 5 months or so have denied using excessive force or violence. Indeed, this is what the UN has accused both Spain and Morocco of, using excessive force. And in fact, in El País today, a UN rapporteur for the human rights of migrants tells El País that it's just unacceptable that the details of what happened there on June the 24th only came to light several months later. Spanish authorities, meanwhile, are denying that they beat migrants and insist that they came to their aid. There's also an interesting article in The Independent which quotes one person as saying on June 24th, that bloody Friday, we were in dire need of the EU, and it did not care about us because we are just Africans. So some very haunting words in the press today, Stuart.
Yeah, it's a very harrowing testament, is indeed. Making other news today, this is a bit of a change. The joy of football fans, those of England, US, Senegal, at least anyway. They're through to the knockout round of the World Cup.
That's right. Let's start with the Senegalese paper, as this Pan-African paper today exclaims the Teranga Lions, that's what the Senegalese team are known as, have done it. They've qualified for the round of 16 after a 2-1 win over Ecuador yesterday. They're now into the knockout round for the first time in 20 years. Another Pan-African paper, Wakat Sera, is actually going with a local language for its headlines, the regional dialect of Wolof. I won't repeat that headline at the risk of massacring that language, but I will tell you what it means. It means, thank you, Lions, adding that with this win, the Senegalese team is keeping alive the dreams of Africans at this World Cup.
Yeah, well, there's similar joy in the British papers as well, perhaps not surprisingly.
Well, the English team has certainly booked its place in the knockout round with a 3-0 win over Wales, Stuart, and it is dominating the front pages of the British papers today. You have the Daily Star, which is admitting that it is a little hungover after yesterday's match. This man here you see on the front page of a lot of the British papers, Marcus Rashford, who scored 2 of those 3 goals. I guess the papers are pretty giddy today because even the Daily Mirror, which usually has a pretty sarcastic, sometimes mean-spirited headline, is going with this, let's say, a pretty simple headline, bish, rash, bosh. I mean, we get the play on words, but it's not very... It's not very thorough as a headline today, but I guess all the papers are just very giddy with excitement. And the Washington Post, too, also featuring the U.S. team, who are also in the knockout round, Stuart, after their 1-0 win over Iran. Red, white, and through, the Washington Post says on its front page.
Very clever. Guess what? I watched the first half of the England game before I went to bed. The half when nobody scored, and then they scored all the goals in the second half, but there you go. Finally from you, Dipti, this new article, this is from the Wall Street Journal. It explains that being a cheap date these days is actually an attractive quality.
That's right. I'm sure nobody ever accused you of being a cheap date.
Oh, never.
Back when you were an eligible bachelor, Stuart. Anyways, the Wall Street Journal says times have changed now, and I mean, back in the 90s, indeed, rom-coms sort of taught us that you have to shower your dates with elaborate gifts and lavish dinners. It appears now that we are also in a time of austerity, and daters are embracing frugality, mainly because, you know, restaurants cost a lot more, and you don't really want to spend a lot of money on someone you barely know because, well, you're spending a lot of money on someone you barely know, and for that person, it's a little bit awkward to have all this attention showered on you by essentially a stranger. So anyways, the Wall Street Journal tells us that more and more daters are choosing not to sweep their date off their feet. They're choosing things like long walks or drinks or even cooking at home, more frugal and less creepy, it appears to it.
I always used to take my girlfriends out for a packet of sandwich and a fizzy drink. It was fine. Nothing wrong with that. You'd be flattered, wouldn't you, Dipti?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's what I dreamed of, sandwich and a Coke, Stuart.
Yeah, with Stuart is the most important bit. Thank you, Dipti. Roll with the papers. More from her in a couple of hours' time.